Friends are struggling to make an English sentence. Here, I'm listening to you as a Chinese guy. Oh, nice. Being bilingual is like a superpower. I mean, if you weren't born in America, it's usually pretty commonplace. Yeah, no, that's a very nice skill to have. And I imagine it only gets easier to learn more languages after you've learned the first. Especially two, like, considerably different languages, I imagine. Because it would be much easier for me to go, if I really wanted to, like, look at Spanish again. I imagine it is far, far easier to go from English to Spanish than it would be to go from, like, English to, I don't know, Mandarin. I don't know if I'd ever become, like, fluent in another language, but I do have an investment in writing. So I feel like learning just at least, like, how languages work and having some insights, that would probably be useful for me. At least, like, knowing what to, like, look for. I definitely brought this up before, but one thing I definitely want to do, maybe a bit of, like, a New Year's resolution or whatnot, is I definitely want to read more. I usually don't make a lot of... I'd like to read more, but I don't often find myself making a ton of time for it. The last time I really had time was when the boys and I went camping. In, where did we go? Was it June this year? It's usually June or July. I think we went in June this year. It was my first summer. I don't know. My summer was crazy because it was just like, it was 2 vacations while also trying to go with like the speed of sound on the world review. I fucked up. But that was the first time in a while that I ever like had time to like sit down and read. And I brought a couple of like older mythology books that my dad has in his library. And it was cool. It was cool to read some like translated old literature because they just write so different from how we do now. It's much more... What would be the word for it? It's a whole lot more, I'd say, like, matter of fact, maybe? Because I read, what? I read the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I read the Odyssey while I was away on vacation. Those were the 2 ones I read. And yeah, no, I mean, just, like, the way they talk, the way a inner monologue would work. It's just so different from how we write nowadays. It was really interesting to actually, like, look at the writing style. There is a matter-of-factness, a kind of, like, grandiosity. Everything the characters say, especially I found, like, in the Odyssey, was usually, like, a very big, bold proclamation. I think a part of that has to be due to the fact that a lot of these are adapted from usually, like, plays and whatnot. Which, like, the original Odyssey, it's not a novel. The original Epic of Gilgamesh wasn't a novel. They were, like, these epic poems. So that's just such a different way of delivering information. Like, I'd say, like, the most different one was definitely Gilgamesh, where you could tell that, like, it's a rhyming and a syllable structure in that old language that just kind of can't exist in an English translation, because there would be multiple times in that adaptation where, like, the characters would repeat the specifics of what they just said. I'm trying to think of... Did I not save adaptability onto this? Mandarin comes from ancient drawings of something. That's why we have over 10,000 characters in the alphabet, and all alphabets are some kind of words. Okay. Interesting. I don't want to be too presumptive, but is that kind of somewhat similar to how, like, say, hieroglyphics work? Where it was words given through images and not so much through, like, an alphabetic character? Something like that? Again, I don't want to speak too presumptively because I'm not 100% certain, but that is the The way at least I think it works. Back to my train of thought of what I was talking about. What was it? I don't know. Sometimes the language, it was like the exact same statement or sentence given. Like, it'd be something along the lines of, I think I remember towards maybe the end of the story, where, like, he's going to try and find these answers about how he's going to die. But the story will say something to the extent of, like, Lord Gilgamesh, why do you come to us? Oh, man, I'm paraphrasing so bad. But with, like, your arm weathered and your hair long and such and such and, like, all this kind of disrepair. And then he would respond, like, this and such, and like, I've come because my friend is dead and whatnot, and that is why I come to you with my hair overgrown and my armor disheveled. It was, like, the exact same word choice, and I have to imagine that that was due to the fact that it was because it was poetic, and it fit just a syllable structure and a rhyme structure that gets lost in translation, which made it something really interesting to just consider how that translation worked and what gets lost in that interpretation. Honestly, that specific copy, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is very, very, very short, as it is extraordinarily, like, to the point. It's very much an and-then kind of narrative. Even that's not essential. There's some stuff that's a little bit and then. Not exclusively. There is a lot of stuff to do with, like, actions and consequences, and there is follow-through. There was a really cool foreword at the start of that particular copy of the story that wasn't so much about the story, it's kind of about the story itself, but it was a lot to do with the finding of the story, like where it was found, who it was found by, under what circumstances it was found, how the story got moved around, how literate interpretations of it were made, where, like, the original documentation was moved around to, the names of the archaeologists and linguists who had a hand in the translation of it and the uncovering of it, and, like, the story, the modern conventional story behind the story, although, like, the salvaging of the story was really, really interesting. Which actually gets me a little bit more interested in history. There's no way I don't have an input delay on this block right now. The Odyssey was another really interesting read. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know until I actually read the damn thing. A lot of the Odyssey isn't even really the Odyssey. That was really only about a third, maybe a little bit more than a third of the book is, like, the actual adventure. And it is retold. It's not told in real time. It is told... Oh, that's what that is. That's a graphics. What the fuck is that moving around? It's told, the actual part of the adventure, they start a lot with his son and, like, the goings-on in his household. But then they go into, like, him looking for his father, that whole ordeal. And then at that point, there is the bit of, like, the very, very end of Odysseus's journey. And then him actually getting back to civilization proper. And it's from that angle that he actually, like, retells a good chunk of the story. And then a lot of the actual book itself from there, like, almost like half of the actual Odyssey is him going back and reclaiming his house, if you know how the story goes. That's actually, like, half the book was him going back to his household and reclaiming it. It honestly wasn't so much even the adventure. And the adventure with, like, the Scylla and the Sirens and Charybdis and, like, what is it, Circe and the Lotus Flowers and all that. It's a little spark-noted. It really isn't the main focus Which, I mean, from the pop culture perspective, you really wouldn't expect that because, you know, people are going to want to see, like, the adventure and the action and the monsters and all that shit. Charge Master, Critical Elements, and Flare. I don't know if Charge Master is all that good, but that's pretty interesting. Charge Master and Critical Element. Huh. If I really wanted to run Elemental Hammer, that'd be something. That would be something. Wasn't one of the tablets that had one of the original parts of the epic some lady was just trying to get rid of something she thought was a family heirloom? That sounds very familiar. That does sound very familiar. The Iliad to Odyssey Boogaloo. I didn't read the Iliad. I just went for the Odyssey, because the Odyssey is what I knew better from, like, a baseline. And just the content of it surprised me. I really liked it, though. I read the entire thing cover to cover. But yeah, no, I mean, that is kind of the merit of reading older literature like that, is just kind of thinking about, well, number one, there were people way, way, way back who wrote that. That's how they wrote. That's, then the context under which it would be written, what may have been lost or added in translation, because, you know, we did do that. I say we, that's more of a, I think that's more of a British thing than an American thing. I'm not entirely sure. That one might be a British thing. I don't know. Again, don't want to be too presumptuous because I won't claim that I know the history perfectly. Really enjoying reading the Odyssey back in middle school. Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's very dramatic. It's very big. It's very grand. It's not even necessarily in the actions. Like, the action is kind of it's not even like, it's not like trying to be cool in a way that we might conventionally think is cool, in that it's like super detailed in a very visceral and gory and carnage-filled battle and getting into all the particulars of that kind of thing. It's just so kind of like larger than life, like that everything just kind of felt so important. Like, it'd almost be corny if it wasn't so just consistent, honestly. And just so genuine. And it makes you think. It makes you think, because, like, that would have been performed live, I think, by just live actors up on stage thousands of years ago. Several of my friends are autistic about a musical adaptation of the Odyssey. Every time they talk about what happens, I just go, oh, yeah, I remember reading that part. Yeah. I didn't know there was a musical about the Odyssey. That's interesting. I know there's the Christopher Nolan movie coming out, which I'm still kind of interested in, though. As soon as I saw that fucking Tom Holland and Zendaya were in there, I'm like, oh, is this going to be a fucking goober movie? Not in the fact that it's going to be silly, but it's like, God, I don't know. Those individuals are a little overcast, I think. We have the opportunity to end it on a funny quest. It's only 10. I've been going for only 3 hours. I can keep going, honestly. Read the Iliad. Achilles' boyfriend died, and a crash out so destructive that the gods themselves sniped his ass. Yeah, that is the paraphrase. Homer.exe and his eyes were realistic in deep dark red blood. Epic. That's the musical. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'd like to make more time for reading. I gotta read Lord of the Rings again. I'm almost due to watch them again. I usually watch the extended trilogy like once a year, and last time I watched them was last September. I gotta watch them at some point this year. I do want to read them again. I definitely want to read them again, because I feel like I'll appreciate it so much more. There was a point a couple of years ago where I listened to an audiobook on, like, someone had the audiobooks on YouTube. I don't know if they're still up, because I don't know if that will get sniped by copyright or whatnot. I don't know how picky YouTube can be about that kind of thing. There was one for The Hobbit, and there was one for The Fellowship of the Ring that I listened to. I think I was just playing, like, Civ 5 or something like that. Andy Serkis did one of them, and he was really fucking good at it. It might have been The Hobbit. I think it was. I think Andy Serkis did an audiobook of the... He might have done all 4 books. I don't... You can tell me. I think he definitely did The Hobbit. It was a really good audiobook recording. Let's see. When I would just need to dedicate a day to doing nothing but silly quests. That could be something to do, yeah. I have a really hard time reading old stories like that. I kind of end up getting really bored, although I haven't read the Odyssey specifically. I don't know. I'd probably have the same experience. Maybe you would. It might not. I mean, like, it's very different from how a lot of conventional authors right now. It's not nearly as introspective. The dialogue is much more different and a lot just bigger. It's not, it I don't know, it lacks a lot of kind of like, it's really weird to put it. I would say it like lacks a lot of little things, but that's not really it either, because it's not like it's undetailed, but it's not like, Craig heard that statement, and his brow furrowed, and he rubbed his hand over his chin and contemplated the information that was given. The trimmed hairs on his beard tickling the underside of his palm, blah, blah, blah. It's nothing like that. That's what you might get a little bit more nowadays. We'll just kind of go like those little kind of like micro things and really kind of paint the picture like that. Not that it's not detail-oriented at all, but it's, I don't know, it's just like, it kind of lingers on the moment a lot less, I think. Like, it kind of allows you more to kind of paint the picture a bit more in your head than it is obsessed with its own details and painting the picture more specifically, might be the way I phrase it. Again, that's, you kind of just have to go in and read it for yourself. But it was an experience that I very much enjoyed. It was very nice and different. Back in my Malaysian school days, we had mandatory book reading. Things happened in the book will be asked in Malay exams. That was not fun. Let's see. Matters if it's homemade or re-uploaded. That is honestly a good thing. Always hates those aspects of books. Really? So you're not a fan of that kind of stuff. Interesting. Yeah, that's a much more kind of modern thing. I think I couldn't tell you exactly like when that change happens, but it had to have been somewhere within the last probably like, I don't know, that'd be a really interesting thing to look into, is just kind of like the historical changing of how just prose works in general and how things were conventionally written. Because The Lord of the Rings, I think, is also not a very kind of like small, minor detail oriented series of books. It also kind of has that more biblical grandiosity to it. I don't know if that was Tolkien writing more in a biblical style, or if that was more the style for the time. Dude, it's a legitimately interesting conversation to have and thing to look into, really. I thought about a lot of this. It makes me interested in, like, the history of literature. Don't need those, don't need those. Tutor classes will straight up give you the questions asked and the answers, which kind of ruins the point of book reading, if you ask me. Oh, yeah, probably. But yeah, no, that whole, like, Derek bought a sandwich from Subway. It was a salami sandwich. And the salami was a little bit saltier than Derek usually likes, but the cheddar cheese was melted just perfectly into the toasted bread, and the crunch of the toasted bread was music to Derek's ears as he bit into the sandwich. They didn't really used to do that all that much, is what I've discovered. And that kind of gets me thinking a little bit about, like, how I want to write when I really kind of, like, properly write fiction and not so much essay style of, do I want it to be a little bit kind of, like, more modern-y, small level, or do I want to maybe go for something a little bit more unspecific and a little bit more proclamative, if that is a word? I thought about that. I've thought about how I would actually want to approach that, what my style, I mean, at some point, you know, your style should be natural, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that it cannot be honed and practiced and have some aspect of deliberateness to it. I think it's a really interesting thing to think about. J.R. Martin type sentences. That's something I should read at some point, even if it's never going to be finished. I think that's what Sam read when we went camping, is he bought these, like, travel edition versions of A Song of Ice and Fire, because he and his fiance watched the show, and he went and read it. I feel like I should, even if the show didn't end super well, and the books are never going to be finished. And Martin's got what seems to be a bit of a more cynical worldview than I do. They were popular for a reason. And it's worth reading stuff even if you don't necessarily... Even if it doesn't necessarily have the same worldview as you. That is worthwhile. Never picked up the hobby of book reading, though. I love reading Wikipedia articles. Yeah, it's a good baseline. Gives you the SparkNotes version of important information. It's a good, like, approachable groundwork to approaching learning about something. Not that it's, like, the most informative. It's that just, like, it breaks it down in very simple language. George R. R. Martin has a genuinely gritty and realistic, non-romanticized take on medieval history. Still managed to write the Ubermensch into his story. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, no. My understanding of his perspective is he really wanted to look at... He wanted a really close look at, like, how real-world kings and queens and wars and factions and noble houses acted and operated, and try to apply that into a world that had soft magic system and dragon dynasties and, like, that shit. I'm certain that man is very well read on history. There was a brief period where I was actually watching some A Song of Ice and Fire lore videos, despite never having watched the show or read the books, just because this usually kind of stumbles onto me. I'll find, like, a clip of the show. Like, I've watched a couple of clips of the show that are really, really good. And then it'll start suggesting me some stuff that's, like, a little bit more on the lore end and whatnot. And I'll follow along with it. And it was following along with some of those lore videos that got me a little bit more interested in reading real-world history like he did. I think I've talked about this a bit on stream before, but I think one thing that is definitely a burden on fiction writing, especially not even quote-unquote modern, but very, very recently, is I believe a lot of people who write currently are predominantly to almost exclusively pop culture fans. And they're not so much major film buffs or history buffs or well read up on language or really kind of delving into certain artistic practices. I think a lot of people working in the arts today are fans who wanted to work for companies that they are fans of, or work on projects equivalent to what they were fans of, and they really aren't taking inspiration from the things that the masters took inspiration from. Like, I'm sure that the people who... And then, of course, they might just be untalented. I think there is also absolutely, even beyond that, some legitimate issues with arts-related education. I would say definitely in the States. I don't know too much beyond that. I think you get taught mostly a lot of just rank and file kind of corporate level how to do things, but not... I think you're more kind of taught how to make things that are within the arts than you are actually taught how to make really good art. That's how I felt when I went to college for game development. I apologize if I'm not really reading or reacting to anything that you guys are saying. I might just stop and take a break and read some insights. I'm sure you guys also have some interesting things that you're saying. I'm just trying to focus on the fight while also trying to keep things interesting for an audience while playing. What was I saying? Right, I think it's a prevailing issue that there's not... So I bet there's a lot of people who, like, are working for LucasArts right now, and I'm sure they like Star Wars. They grew up liking Star Wars. I mean, that's every single interview you get with someone who's making Star Wars content in, like, the 2010s or whatnot. It's like, I grew up with the original trilogy. My dad showed me the VHSs, and they changed my life, and ever since then, I wanted to make the Star Wars, and I say the right things online so Disney will let me make Star Wars. But, like, George Lucas was not a fan of I mean, I'm sure he was because an artist to some extent should probably be a fan of the things that we're making. But George Lucas did not make A New Hope because he was a fan of Star Wars. He made it because he is a gigantic fan of the film of history and serialized television. Good lord, she died fast. Holy cow, I've never seen her go down that easy. He was a gigantic, ginormous fan of film itself. And if you go and you look, there's a video online, I believe it's called You're Watching the Prequel Trilogy Wrong. I forget who made it. It's someone a little bit smaller scale. But one of the things he did was he lined up a ton of shots from the George Lucas Star Wars films. And he paired that off with shots from a ton of other films that Lucas was clearly a fan of. And the amount of just recreated, repurposed, and reinterpreted shots from so many other movies that you've probably never heard of, never seen, but he's seen and has heard of, that he just retranslated into a different context was a very interesting thing to see, to the point where, you know, you'll get a lot of people who are like, this is a very clear, blatant homage shot, but it'll be like homaging to something very famous and very specific and very overt. Like, no, he was throwing in stuff to, like, black and white movies that you and I have probably never, ever heard of. Let's see. Let me actually read, because I'm sure you guys are trying to engage with me, and I was unable to engage back because I was cracking a fish over the head with a hammer. Let's see. You want some primers on general history things. Brett that'd be a French name. I'm not up on French pronunciation. Devereaux, maybe? Devereaux? It's probably Devereaux. Devereaux's blog, a collection of unmitigated pedantry, has a lot of fun and insightful articles. Don't think the fault of the sequel trilogy was just the writer's fault, but the higher-ups trying to shove as much nostalgia bait as possible until we get Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, I mean, we are certainly culturally living in an age of nostalgia pandering right now. It sucks. It's gotten really bad. It's gotten to the point where this stuff can really only reference itself at this point, and it is so desperate for you to feel the emotions that you felt while watching that original content without earning it of its own merits whatsoever. And there was a period of time where I think a lot of people were definitely falling for it, but then the quality got worse and worse and worse, and it was progressively getting lazier and lazier. I think people have really started to pick up on that fact at this point. Gotta be real, I never cared for Star Wars. I mean, to each their own, honestly. It was probably my biggest thing growing up. To be fair, growing up with Star Wars in the early 2000s was really cool. Say whatever you want about the prequel movies, but the media that was built around it was awesome. Star Wars was a media juggernaut when I was growing up. Like 2000, I'd say probably like 19, probably like, because what? Phantom Menace would have been 98? Probably like 98 to like 2000, probably like, it definitely goes down a little bit when Clone Wars comes out in 2008, because Clone Wars wasn't like a massive juggernaut, and also wasn't super liked when it first came out. But like, for whatever you can say about the prequels, the excitement around them at the time was gargantuan. So like 97 to around like 2005, it was a really cool time. Because, like, the Clone Wars was just awesome. It was a really cool period. The concept artists that Lucas had on his team were just some of the best in the business. He had a really good eye for picking people to make his shit look and sound good. Like, to this day, the concept art people, music, and, like, sound effects people that Lucas was able to get for his Star Wars movies is, like, some of the all-time best that I think cinema has ever had the pleasure of having. It was just so much cool iconography to Star Wars at that point in time. And it was just, you had the Clone Wars cartoon, you had the movies themselves. 2005 was a big year for like Star Wars video games. Let's see. Stranger Things did unspeakable damage to entertainment as a whole. You think so? I can kind of vibe with that, honestly, because that definitely seems to be, maybe not it itself, but it seems to be a bit of an explosion point of, like, the 80s nostalgia boom. It's definitely not the only one, definitely not the first one, but that was a big thing coming out of it. It's like, oh, it feels like the 80s. It's the 80s. They're talking about the 80s things. They're talking about fucking, I don't know, Ghostbusters and Dungeons & Dragons. And, like, the bad guys, your Dungeons & Dragons villains that they fucking butchered. I've talked about the fact that I do not like, oh, fucking, what's his name? The really cool prince in D&D that they made into a super fucking flower vagina monster in Stranger Things was fucking, start with a D. Demogorgon. It's Demogorgon. I've talked about how much I hate the Stranger Things Demogorgon many times. Last Jedi was a really pretty movie. Rather do something with a toothpick than watch it again. Rise of Skywalker doesn't even look good. Had a high production value. Lighting and direction was so much worse. Oh, yeah. I mean, really nice, snazzy technology and big, highfalutin cameras can only do so much for you if you really... What a train wreck. I was not mature enough to understand the bad writing of the prequels back then. It was a very long honeymoon with the series. I even got the PS2 Force Unleashed. Yeah. I had the PS3 one and I had the Wii. Yeah, no, I mean, like, the prequels are, like, simultaneously a little bit better and a little bit worse on rewatch. They've definitely got a little bit of an apology kick, I think, with the sequel trilogy. As the sequel trilogy is worse. But for all the issues, I mean, yeah, Lucas needed another writer. He needed a translator, because Lucas had a lot of really cool ideas. He needed someone to translate it better. Knights of the Old Republic, Force Unleashed, Lego Star Wars. Yeah, dude, the original Battlefront games. Fucking Empire at War. The old Knights of the Old Republic games. Force Unleashed ones were cool. There was some tie-in stuff with the Clone Wars animated series that I had that I liked, even though I don't... There was a lightsaber duels game for the Clone Wars for the Wii that I really liked. That one was fun as hell. I liked that one. But they didn't really make too much, like, accessory Clone Wars media after, like, Season 1 or Season 2, unfortunately. Star Wars in the 2010s was the downhill of the franchise. Oh, yeah. Oh, of course. I mean, it got bought in 2012, and then it just, yeah, unfortunately. I feel like a lot of writers nowadays are too scared to look outside of Europe and Asia for fantasy and even for sci-fi. Yeah, I mean... Yeah. To be fair, like, even my stuff is definitely going to have a whole bunch of Europeanisms to it. Because, like, I mean, Tolkien is just such a massive focal point of fantasy culture that everything kind of went into and out of. But it would probably be worthwhile to read a lot more stuff that isn't him. And I bet he would recommend that you read a whole bunch of stuff that isn't him to broaden your perspectives. Luke's had a lot of really cool ideas. You mean like moral determinism and eugenics? Story writing aside, prequels sure have great world building and ideas. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fucking cool concepts out there. I really hate stories that justify atrocities with shitty determinism. It's okay for the Targaryens to have ruled for so long because of the fire versus ice prophecy. Really, did the books, like, say it was a good thing? Like, what... Does that seem to be the subtext behind it? Again, I haven't read it. Targaryens are the worst part of A Song of Ice and Fire. Where I read, just prefer academic books or comics and manga. Find them more pleasant to read. Fair enough. Star Wars probably should have stopped after the original trilogy. I'm kind of glad it didn't. I am glad it didn't. As much as, like, the prequels are not great movies, I'm very, very thankful for a lot of what existed around them. I'm very thankful for how that positively impacted my childhood and a lot of the things I got from it. I've always hated the trope where a group of characters have to forget each other to save the world. I don't know if I... I don't know if that's one I see too often, but that does... Yeah, I can think of a couple examples of that happening, and I don't think I've ever been satisfied by that either. It feels... Something like that feels like it's kind of just trying to be sad. I don't know. Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan was the best part of the entire prequel trilogy? Maybe. I don't know. I still think Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine might be. As fucking corny as that shit was, that performance is amazing. Star Wars as a world gets less expansive the more these shows and movies pander nostalgia. Everything important in this universe happened on Tatooine. I have heard that point a lot, and I don't necessarily disagree. The only franchise that should keep going is Godzilla, because they seem to always come up with something new. Nor do they harp on crazy amounts of nostalgia bait. Yeah, you know, I had this conversation with a buddy a couple of weeks ago. The really cool thing about Godzilla is there is something that's hyper flexible about him. Honestly, I think he's probably the Japanese version of Batman, honestly, where you have a character that's lasted forever through so many incarnations. All those different incarnations can be extremely different, but also very definitive, very impactful, and they can also work extremely well. The character is enormously malleable. We had a conversation to the extent of it is fascinating that we have a franchise in this world where perhaps its best entry, maybe its best one ever. I don't know. I'd really like to do like a hardline 54 versus -1 conversation at some point, and really look and see which one's better. But if -1 is the better movie, how interesting is it that this nigh on 40 entry movie series about a giant radioactive dinosaur coming up out of the ocean to blow up buildings is one of the most flexible series ever made, and at the same time, it had maybe its best entry ever 70 years into its career at almost movie 40. What else is even close to being able to do that? I think the only other thing with like that kind of level of longevity and also having that kind of interpretation and impactful stuff this late on in its lifestyle is like our interpretations of older mythologies and what we're able to do with them, and some of the really good stuff we've been able to make. Like the God of War titles, or the Hades games, or something like that, even. Just to name a few off the top of the head. What I don't like is when a sequel series where the previous main characters are crappy parents or grumpy old people feels odd. That is something that modern Hollywood does a ton that I abhor. Indiana Jones's son fucking died in Vietnam, and his wife left him, and now he sits on his couch and fucking is too much of a coward to kill himself. That's the Dial of Destiny. Woo! Why did nobody like this movie? Yeah, it's fucking miserable. Why the fuck would I want to watch that? That was another big thing with the Star Wars. It's like, yeah, no, Han Solo is a fucking crash-out, deadbeat dad who abandoned his wife and son and goes back to doing crime. Wow, thanks. I love it. A lot of writers are afraid to be creative, and I kind of understand that. That doesn't mean it doesn't suck. Some. I think that applies to some people. There are some writers who I think are definitely, they are good little soldier ants, who, they are the people who are willing to pick up the check to do what the producer's notes for the big company wants to do. I don't think that is necessarily always a issue with a writer being a coward. In some places, it might be the fact that someone wants to be a writer, but they're not necessarily very creative. That definitely can happen. I think we're seeing a little bit more with some of the indie projects coming out of YouTube, that it's not so much that, like, creative writing isn't dead. It's definitely strangled at certain very high production level, pop culture, corporate level art stuff. But it's not so much that they're like, we are out of good writers, and we're out of people who want to be creative. Another note that I have seen come out is that there are writers who are well aware of the fact that because what they actually want to make doesn't have a tried and true name attached to it, they will take something that is their own idea, but they will say, oh, I wrote a script for The Witcher, or The Wheel of Time, or something like that, when it really never was. It was just, there was enough close enough to that source material with a tried and true name that, like, a producer would be more willing to pick it up, but they attached a whole bunch of their own ideas to it, and that's where you get adaptations that just feel nothing spiritually like what they are adapting. Seems to be something that comes out of the Hollywood circuit as well. I believe Brandon Sanders said something to that extent, where he, like, got a draft of something that was related to something that he made, and it just was not what he made in the fucking slightest. Godzilla vs. Charles Barkley is peak cinema. Yeah. That's not in a good way of saying, that's, oh god, way of saying return. Think of this new Star Wars movie as somehow Disney has returned. Yeah, I mean, it's telling that we haven't got one in about 6 or 7 years at this point. The Black Knight animation that might not be produced, I did see that Tartakovsky was shopping that out, yeah, because what is it, Sony didn't pick up on it? Which, I mean, like, I don't know, hasn't fucking Tartakovsky proved himself at this point? I know not everything he's ever made has been the greatest thing ever, but, like, the resume is really good. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do something by Tartakovsky, which is a big giant knight in a black suit of armor fighting some ninja lady. Oh, then they fly now. What a line. Like, man, you clearly don't know why these movies used to be funny. Empire is a surprisingly funny movie. Maybe I just like C-3PO more than other people. I don't know. Pretty sure Sony dropped and sold K-pop Demon Hunters to Netflix because they don't think it would do well. Now Netflix has the money thanks to Demon Hunters. Yeah, I mean, Demon Hunters fucking blew up. That was everywhere for like 2 weeks. And it still kind of comes up in meme culture a little bit. And there's a couple of essays still being made on it. Like, it wasn't like the most long-lived thing ever, but it also wasn't like a flash-in-the-pan fad either. I don't know if I'll ever get around to watching it. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily my thing, but like, hey, if it's good, it's good. Cool for the people that made it. There we go. Found a movie called Primitive War that made beautiful feathered dinosaurs. You know, they made them bulletproof frenzied movie monsters again. Ah, well. Why is Sony allergic to making money? They thought Morbius would make more money than Demon Hunters. Yeah, dude. Oh, yeah. The Spider-Man villain cinematic universe with no Spider-Man in it. Who the fuck thought that was a good idea? K-pop Demon Hunters popped off so hard. They put it into Fortnite after only like 3 months after it came out. True. True, it did. It got into Fortnite fucking fast. Movie's so good, Sony re-released it again to bomb even harder than before. That is one of the funniest things ever. It's like, oh boy, we're gonna get in on the meme potential of Morpheus. Or Morbius. Morbius is going back into theaters, baby. Oh, Morbius all day, every day, Morbius. And then nobody fucking... I don't even think it broke like 6 digits. I think it made like $70,000. Oh, what a fucking idiot, dude. How? How did you think that was a good idea?